Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for my video review of the Horus Heresy Book 6, Retribution by Forge World. So the sixth book in the epic Forge World series chronicling the events and timelines of the Horus Heresy galactic civil war fought between the Emperor of Mankind and the forces of the traitorous War Master Horus Lupercal. So this is currently the most recently available book and follows Book V, Tempest. So what I'm going to do in this review is I'm going to go cover to cover and I'm going to take you through the contents of the book, summarise some of the key history and the story that's told, and I'm going to talk to you as well about the armies and the special campaign rules that are contained within as well. There's a lot to cover in this book. It's a really interesting and fascinating addition to the Horus Heresy line, so hence why the review is going to be a long one. But yeah, I do hope you enjoy it. Right, so let's get into this. So we've got the same high quality black leather bound book as we've seen in this series thus far, and then we've got these tough metal corners on with the quillers on them, so yeah, beware of those on your delicate furnishings. It comes with a ribbon to mark the page in your book, which is a nice feature. And then, of course, we have this excellent quality art that is the norm in Forge World books, and you get these composite model and computer-generated effects. Oops. So how does this book open? It opens with the following statement beneath an image of a Raven Guard Contemptor Dreadnought. The tide of war drowns humanity in blood, the warp rolls and terrors breed in the shadows. And there's always a case that does indeed foretell what this book is going to tell us about. So here we have it, yes. Horus Heresy Book 6, Retribution. So what does this book contain? So this book is very rich in background and history. It actually has the longest history section thus far in the Horus Heresy range of books, and that in total tops out 127 pages. So you know, almost a third of the book. Normally that's been around 70 odd pages. So this has a lot of history to it, and that is a good thing because it's very interesting and well written. So what we have is the background, the Wars of Retribution, and what this book does and what the Wars of Retribution are is it tells a tale of how arguably most of the Horus Heresy war was actually fought. So previous books have been focused on quite specific battles, and then obviously the major linchpin events of the war, the turning points such as Istvaan, Phal and Calth. What this really does, I think, very effectively is it actually gives you the scope and the nature of how most of the war was fought, and that is where the two principal forces that this book gives us, the Shattered Legions and the Black Shields, come into play. That history section is then followed by a campaign, the Retribution campaign. We then have Shadow Wars in the Age of Darkness. So the Retribution campaign follows a history in the War of Retribution. The Shadow Wars in the Age of Darkness is, shall we say, non-generic insofar as it isn't linked around characters and background the same. These are more general scenarios. We then have the rules around the Shattered Legions. And then we have a similar treatment for the Black Shields. There's quite a large section on Space Marine Legion, Crusade Legion army editions. And this book, more than any other, is what you might call a book of heroes, and it includes a wide variety of key characters, both on the traitor and the loyalist side, but particularly the loyalist side, and it includes such esteemed characters as Nathaniel Garrow and Shadrach Meduson. We get Legion specific rules for the final three, or the next three Marine chapters, and not the final three, there's still more to come. We get the Blood Angels, Dark Angels and White Scars. These are not fully developed, but it is a decent starting point if you wanted to play those forces. We then have an additional set, army list additions for the Mechanicum, including a revised section on the Cyberthurgy robotic control powers. And then finally we have an update on missions for battles in the Age of Darkness. So yes, it's a big book, so yeah, let's get into this. So fantastic opening picture featuring a Mechanicum Ordinatus Minoris Elator, armed with this absolutely epic and devastating sonic weaponry. And here we have the preface from our author AK. So AK is an imperial author who, at the end of his life, is writing an account of the late Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and the Great Scouring, having lived through all those events. We don't yet know who AK is, and perhaps at some point we may find out. And in this preface he talks about the rise of the Black Shields and the nascent empire which had been so gloriously and successfully created, spinning out of control in the aftermath of Horus's growing rebellion. So first section, so this is the background lore, the Wars of Retribution, and this is split into 6 separate sections. Now this first page, The Age of Betrayal, is a bit of a scene setter, and it talks about it doesn't just talk about what's happened so far, but it also gives us a little bit of a scene setter with regards to the Blood Angels, Dark Angels and White Scars in terms of where they've been and how they got flung to the remote corners of Galaxy by Horus's deception to get them out of the way of the combat. And it also articulates a very key theme of this book, how Terra, the seat of humanity's empire, loses control of the battle, and that's just because of the sheer size of it, but also the complexity of what's going on and the constantly shifting and uncertain loyalties of troops, Forge Worlds, Space Marine legions. And even though there are well-defined loyalties of Space Marine legions according to which way a Primarch was loyal, the loyalty of all their legionnaires under their command is far from certain, and that is explored very effectively in this book. Again, it touches on here this point of how you can't just look at a Primarch's loyalty to understand the Legion's loyalty, by giving another example here of how a substantial number of Iron Warriors remained loyal and fought alongside a force of Dark Angels and White Scars in a significant operation. So then we talk about the Ruin Storm and the spread of the influence of Chaos and the Warp Storms and the encroachment of demons into the Materium. And it talks about how by Millennium 31 Year 10, the Imperium had very much collapsed as a functional body and was now completely consumed by war. So in a short space of a short few years, immense damage has been done. Very interestingly here it talks about the 2 key Imperial protagonists in the form of Rogel Dawn and Malcador the Sigillite, and it actually discusses here how while they were working very closely, in terms of their loyalty, their aims often differed significantly, and even makes a case that sometimes perhaps the most trusted agents of Malcador could have fought against Rogel Dawn's forces, each of them pursuing somewhat different agendas, despite the fact they are both loyal to the Imperium. An absolutely fascinating concept. And then we develop the idea of how the Black Shields, which are actually predominantly, to begin with, a loyalist group, although Black Shields can be both loyal, traitorous and allurent to themselves. Early on they were more seen as a loyalist force for various reasons, such as Marines from Traitor legions who discarded their heraldry and fought as a mark of, as an acknowledgement of shame. And it talks about here how those Black Shields bled the strength of the traitors dry, through 1,000 little cuts. So although, the loyalists of the original 4 traitor legions were snubbed out in many ways, enough of them survived as to still have a significant military impact. This section now, this is called the Kingdom Divided, and it talks about every single Space Marine Legion, and it gives a little bit of a, shall we say, a plot update as to who's doing what, where, and how, and when. And this helps, I guess, feel the constant theme that runs through the Horus Heresy books of experiment with your Force ideas and your Force loyalty. Don't let the loyalty of the Primarch dictate whether or not you play Loyalist Iron Warriors, or Traitor Iron Hands, or Traitor Blood Angels, or Loyalist Sons of Horus. Common theme with this is don't be constrained by those simple cliches. And then we have a selection of warriors. I like this picture of this particular Salamander Legionnaire, and he's wearing a complete mishmash of armour types, and this, I guess, this kind of shows us how the situation and supply situation deteriorated. And we've got Mark V legs and torso, we have a Mark III helmet, a Mark II shoulder pad, and arguably Mark IV forearm. So yeah, a complete mishmash. Here we have an Iron Hands Legionary, and his armour has been repaired by unpainted armour sections. So his Mark III suit has had Mark IV sections added to it, but it's still got the manufacturing mark of the forge that prepared it. And again, the theme of loyal traitors. Here we have an Iron Warriors Contempt to Dreadnought, and this is a loyal warrior who fought alongside other loyal legions. Now, here we have an interesting little section, and what this kind of does is this for the first time, this actually takes the events of the preceding 5 books and gives us some sort of timeline that links them all together in a single coherent location. And this is really rather neat, actually. And I've read through this, and I actually kind of wrote out a quick chronology of how the books actually fit together in terms of the first events that happen in each book. And we get quite an unusual chronology, really. The earliest events actually is going to be in Book 7, which isn't out yet. It's going to be out in a couple of weeks, which is Inferno. And then that's followed by Book 8, which I'm assuming, which is going to be Angelus, which is going to deal with the Dark Angels and the Blood Angels. And the first Blood Angel events on this timeline happens shortly after Prospero. Then we become more sequential. We get to Book 1, Book 2, Book 3. And then we go to Book 5, which is the events of Calth. But then we go back to Book 4 from Conquest. And then Book 6 sort of overarches the events of Books 5 and 4 and will continue on as well. And some of these other books continue through this time as well. But I was very interested to just sort of like work out the chronology of the books that we've already seen and the books that are just on the horizon as well. And it gives some key battles as well. So that's a nice little bit to add there, and it cements the series together. So then we move to the second stage of the Retribution Wars, upon the Anvil of War. And this deals with an engagement that had far-reaching consequences for certain heroes, and the spacecraft, the Salamander spacecraft called the Ebon Drake. And it touches on disunity amongst the traitors, and particularly the Iron Warrior character Narek Draeger, who's going to become significant as well. How he was, although he was in a force with the Alpha Legion and the Sons of Horus, there was poor unified command between them, and his loyalty to the traitor cause began to waver because of the poor coordination between the 3 legions. And it also talks about the fact that while the loyalist legions were generally good and staunch allies, the traitors were less well coordinated and more fractured by their own objectives. What it then talks about is the Ebon Drake and its journey and its commander Zyphas Dur, and it goes on something of an odyssey. I mean, Zyphas Dur is a bit of an Odysseus or Ulysses character, and and its story is not unlike the Iliad, where the Ebon Drake travels from many systems. It goes to Istvaan 5, recovers Cassius Dracos. Yeah, I like the historical parallel there. And then we move on to the events of Portmore, where Horus is mustering an enormous invasion force. However, it was not to go unopposed. And then we have the Battle of Mazoa. So if you remember from Book 4, Mazoa was a Mechanicum Forge World, and the Archmagos of Mazoa refuse the advances of Kelbol Harl's emissary Regulus, and the Traitors then launch a military campaign to subdue and take the world. However, the arrival of the Ebon Drake and Cassius Dracos stops that, and it talks about here how Cassius Dracos confronts Narek Draeger of the Iron Warriors, and the two talk, and then Draeger shifts his loyalty back to the Imperium once more, and then we have Draeger. And this guy, Narek Draeger, the Gravewalker, was a event-specific miniature a few years back. Yeah, very nice model that, so there is actually a model for that guy. And here we have another loyal Iron Warrior, Dreadnought. And then we have some paint schemes from the battles around the Ebon Drake and Mazoa. One of the Alpha Warriors. The Disciples of Flames are, I suppose you would count, they're sort of like a shattered legion, like a survivors from the Salamanders who went their own path, shall we say, in revenge. Some nice depictions of Salamander vehicles, and equally impressive artwork of Alpha Legion Decapitation Squadron. So here we have a couple of examples of the top tank hunters in the Legion: the Vindicator Laser Destroyer and the Sikaran Venator. And then we move to the third part of this tale of the Retribution War, which is the Zana Incursion. The Zana Incursion is a great bit of Imperial history in its own right, and this is one of the bits in these Horus Heresy books that just gives more and more depth to the whole Imperium and its complexities and idiosyncrasies. So Zana, which is an enormous and very rich forge world, is always somewhat separated from human space, and when the Great Crusade arrives, not only is it independent of the Imperium, but it is also independent of the Mechanicum of Mars, and it actually plays off the Emperor's advances and that of the Mechanicum to get the best deal, and it actually ultimately strikes its own version of the Treaty of Mars with the Emperor and becomes in effect a miniature Mechanicum body, in terms of it is independent from the Empire, but it also has independence from the Mechanicum. So an intriguing, unusual entity. Some cool little planetary artwork there of well, I guess it's some gas giant, asteroid field and some other stuff. The planetary physics of these things must be dangerous, having all these asteroids flying around near a planet, but let's not worry about the science. And that is described, Zana's unusual status in the Imperium and the Mechanicum, in this section, the Zana Paradox. And this is to have effects later on in the Horus Heresy. So after Horus begins his traitorous rebellion, the Zana, the Forge World of Zana finds itself in a similar position again. Once again, it is being coveted by both the Imperium and Horus for its loyalty. And once again, sticking true to form, it plays one off against the other, looking for the best and strongest bargain. Great picture of a Thanatar in battle there. And it's quite funny. We have a clearly plasma blobbed Space Marines here that are still roasting hot underneath their armour. having had a dollop of that thing. And what happens though is Zana declared loyalty to Horus, having secured the best deal in their view, and a deal that basically allows them to operate outside of the old prescriptions and prohibitions of the Mechanicum with regards to dealing with such heretic technologies such as artificial intelligence. However, the Dawn's hand is not entirely spoiled here, and his emissary, who we believe turns out to be Endred Har, a world eater of all people, again a loyal traitor, spoils the party for Zana. And Zana tries to give Horus a gift of 3 Ordinatus Minoris Ulator war engines, which are truly mighty devices. But the forces of Endred Har attack to prevent that happening. And there is a tremendous battle, and as is often the case in the Horus Heresy, and it features a truly bizarre moment. One of the other parts of the deal with Zana is Horus said they could have the corpses of Istvaan 3 and 5. So thousands and thousands and thousands of crates of destroyed war gear and dead Astartes are handed over to Zana, and they're all piled up on the planet. Then there is a bizarre event where the corpses of these machines and Astartes come to life and turn upon the Zana forge. Now, what's going on here, we don't know, and it's certainly perhaps the first of a more mystical and unusual style of event that is more common in the world of 40k than we've ever seen in 30k. But without a den, when it's called the Vengeance of the Fallen, these corpse Astartes wreak havoc upon Zana. And the Dark Angels are involved as well. And the Dark Angels cruiser plays a pivotal role in this battle, and they capture a Xenos tech vessel from Zana called Mu 571, which is like a crystalline vessel. Then this is one of the Black Shield Tech Marines with the Loyalists, who many of whom sacrifice themselves to take over control of one of the malevolent Ordinatus engines. And here, this disturbing looking Castellax, which was wrecked. This is part of the war dead and the wreckage of Istvaan, but for some reason it came back to life and attacked that forge. Don't know, could you say it looks possessed? But if so, why did it act against Horus? We don't know. House Melanax is a traitorous knight house, and who own this very distinctive paint scheme. This is based on some actual models that were painted by Forge World artist and designer Mark Bedford. And there's a Knight Styrax. And here we have one of the 3 Ordinatus Minoris Elator which were involved in Zana. And that concludes that thread of the story. And then we move into the next section, which is called the Eye of the Storm. So the Eye of the Storm, well, it is indeed touches upon the effects of the Ruin Storm across the Imperium, and the Dark Brotherhood, which is a substantial Black Shield group. And here we get the first mention of a couple of very significant characters. First, the Nemean Reaver, and the war he wages against the Alpha Legion. The Nemean Reaver is the leader of the Dark Brotherhood, Black Shields. And here we have the hand of a Sigillite, Nathaniel Garrow. And Nathaniel Garrow is sent to try persuade the Dark Brotherhood to join, or members of the Dark Brotherhood to join the cause of the Sigillites' Knight Errants. And unfortunately, due to a traitor trap which is covered in a scenario later on, he's unsuccessful, apart from in the case of the Nemean Reaver, who he does bring to the Loyalist cause. And interestingly, part of the Nemian Reavers Dark Brotherhood are Blood Angels and White Scars Legionnaires. So yeah, it's a very complicated and convoluted history. And the reason why they were Garrow was unable to persuade them all to join was because of an ambush by the Alpha Legion. But still, the Reaver was a significant victory. And then we get some pictures of these particular black shields, a Storm Eagle and a jet bike, a scimitar jet bike. And then here we have the protagonists in this confrontation: the Alpha Legion, a White Scar, and a Blood Angel tactical legionary. And some cool Blood Angel vehicles depicted here, and I particularly like this artistic angel painted on the side of a Spartan. That's very in character. Now on to what perhaps is my favourite of these particular plots of the Wars of Retribution, Tooth and Claw. And I like this because it features one of the great Iron Hands characters of Horus Heresy, Ortek Mor. I've got a video all about Ortek Mor. Is he a Thunder Warrior? That's my speculation. Anyway, right. After Istvaan V, Ortek Mor was involved in Istvaan V. However, he was in orbit and his forces never made planetfall because basically he's a clan leader of Clan Morgul, and he didn't get along with Ferrus Manus very well, so he wasn't seen as being one of his honoured clan leaders. However, he was still there. After the 4 new traitor legions attacked, after a desperate attempt, he knew the battle was lost, and he took his flagship, the Red Talon, and fled the Istvaan system. The Iron Hands were the most numerous survivors of the 3 victims of the Istvaan V massacre, and however, despite Ortek Mor retaining a significant portion of functional command, he wasn't interested in Shadrach Meduson's Shattered Legion guerrilla warfare and insurgency, and he wanted to prosecute large-scale military actions against his enemies. And he pursues a war of devastation and destruction against the traitors in a very cold and calculating way, and the use of weapons such as nuclear weapons against cities on traitor planets is not outside of his remit, and he's utterly brutal, but yet very effective. And it's an interesting counterpoint with his war of direct military action to Shadrach Meduson and the Shattered Legion's insurgency. And then we come to the planet of Bot. Now Bot is a World Eater recruitment world, and it is on Bot that they started to introduce accelerated legionnaire induction programs, and then in particular get into hyper-accelerated programs creating unstable Astartes warriors. And Bot is chosen as a location to attack by Mor to retrieve a relic. And Mor does this in spite of being ordered by the Council of Terror to join an Imperial Fist fleet in another action against the traitors. He just ignores it and he pursues this objective instead. And that gives us a feel for how strong Legion Praetors could just do their own thing. Obviously he was loyal to the Empire, however he had a very different idea of what victory was going to look like. Mor with his Clan Morgul Iron Hands, along with a detachment of the Imperial Fists and a significant force of Solar Auxilia, attack Bot. They launch their attack, and it's a very all or nothing attack because Bot has a small moon that orbits close to it, and Mor uses his fleet's firepower to nudge the orbit of this moon onto a collision course with a planet, which gives his assault a very finite amount of time to succeed, and means that whatever happens, the planet is going to be destroyed by the resultant moon impact, or certainly, any human or civilized life or any technology is going to be wiped out by the impact. Obviously the planet survives, but not the people. And so there is an enormous battle, as is the writ of the Horus Heresy, and this is a battle that's decided by the Terminators, Mor's Gorgon Terminators, and also the Red Butchers of the World Eaters have a big impact. So eventually Mor penetrates into the macro silos, and eventually he returns to the surface with a stasis casket in his servo arm, which bears the seal of the Emperor's gene rights, who were involved in the creation of the Primarchs and the original Astartes. As to what he actually retrieved in this case, we don't know. So the Imperial Fists, Auxilia and Iron Hands leave the planet. The World Eaters just go out of control. They end up fighting the gun fighters, who are kind of like the tribal warriors, and it just degenerates utterly. But of course that's all irrelevant because the moon wipes them all out when it collides with the planet. But you get a detailed description of the forces that are involved, which is nice. So if you want to play this, it's well defined. And then you get a map of the key engagement as well. And then we get some depictions of warriors who were involved in the battle. And while certain warriors remain, somewhat unchanged and quite true to their original Legion depictions, or perhaps slight variations in the armour, the World Eaters are beginning to change, and the blue of their pre-heresy armour is being replaced by red, and we're seeing these gladiatorial styles of armour starting to appear. This is a neat little thing, this Xiphon Interceptor. This is what happens if you take the principle of a dreadnought and combine it with a fighter. The pilot of this was actually an Iron Hand pilot who'd been grievously wounded, and he was interned into a fighter instead of a dreadnought. And then we have some World Eater armoured assets as well. And again, the red is beginning to appear and replace the blue. And this one here is, interestingly, it's got a little Warhounds mark on it. And there's a Red Butcher and a Mechanicum Talax of the World Eaters forces as well. And we move forward to the next section. Now, the Scourging of the Nostromo sector. This is fascinating, and I wasn't expecting this. And what this deals with the Night Lord's sphere of influence, the Nostromo sector, and it's written in retrospect. So it's written after the heresy, so perhaps 30 years after the heresy. And basically, the Imperial fleet of Great Scouring arrive, perhaps 20 years after the heresy, sorry. The Imperial fleet arrives to find that the Night Lords have been swept from the majority of the sector, and there's very little left. And it's almost like a bit of a space ghost story as to what went on. And the story is then told through sections of communications and reports. So we have some from the Blood Angels here, and then the observations of our author AK. And we have this mysterious marine chapter, the Ashen Claws, who were working against the Night Lords. And here we have one of their legionaries depicted, but we don't know who the Ashen Claws are. There's no chapter by that name, no legion by that name. Sorry, there's no legion by that name. There is a chapter by that name. And it was a series of excerpts that create a pieced together story of what happened. And this reflects the fact that whatever happened did so outside of the eyes of the main Imperial histories. Anyway, I won't spoil all the story for you there, but and there's a message here which is intercepted year 63 of millennia 61, which is an echo of the past, which explains what happened. So yeah, but if you get the book, it's really it's a very interesting tale, that one. And I wasn't expecting it, and it was very interesting and an enjoyable little bit of a book. And that brings us to the end of the history section. So yeah, it's I think the history in this is really good, and it does what Book 4 tried to do, but it executes it really well. And it does that by, I think the thing it introduces into this that Book 4 lacked is the heroes and the characters, the villains. And by bringing those in, and then also the mystery of the Black Shields and the Shattered Legions, it really brings these stories to life. So yeah, very good. Right, the Retribution campaign. So what do we have in this section? So we get 2 campaign sections in the book. So this is kind of like the narrative campaign to accompany some of the history we've just covered there. And the style of play changes in these campaigns. We move from the large set piece battles of the earlier books into much smaller unit actions as well, and disparate forces as well, of course, the Shattered Legions and the Black Shields. And there's a couple of different sort of flavours of campaigns. So you have what they've called behind enemy lines, then the Shadow War, and then you get some special missions. So this one here called the Vanguard Preliminary Mission. I mean, if you've ever played Kill Team in Warhammer 40,000, well, this takes the small unit action style of Kill Team and brings it into the Horus Heresy. So that's really neat. And why can't you bring the two together? And then you do get some legendary missions as well to capture some of the epic battles of the Retribution War. So this first one is a Conclave of the Lost. So this is Garrow's council and attempt to bring the Nemean into the Imperial fold. The next one, the Point of Desperation. This is one of the battles of the Ashen Claws against the Night Lords. This is on the World of Desperation. So yeah, that's a neat battle. And then we have between Hamel and Anvil. So this deals with Cassian Dracos on Mazoa. And then finally, we have the Slayer of Worlds, and this deals with Ortek Mor's assault on Bot. Then we move into what I would call the non-generic part of the campaign section, which is Shadow Wars in the Age of Darkness. So while that gave us narrative missions with plots and characters, these are general rules around playing battles with the Shattered Legions and the Black Shields. And we get the Age of Darkness rules again. It's a rather neat picture. Puts me in mind of some early 40k art which showed some Marines hidden in a rock formation watching passing enemies below. And yeah, we get deployment maps. I mean, this will be very familiar to people who've bought other Horus Heresy books and the sort of campaigns that they contained. And 6 mission types as well. We then round out the section with some new rights of war. So there are some general rights of war that are available to all legions, but then there are also some legion-specific ones as well. And many of these are complementary to the Retribution Wars story. But if you're looking to bring a new flavour to your forces, this is a great way of reshaping, your rights of war. And there's one for every legion thus far covered, as well as the extra general purpose ones. Now we move to one of 2 main, shall we say, army sections of the book. The first covering the Shattered Legions, of course. So the Shattered Legions are very much the survivors of Istvaan V. And the basic premise of this, and there's a lot of fiction written about these, but the basic premise is that the charismatic leader Shadrach Medusan of the Iron Hands managed to unify these fragmented and disparate elements of the Raven Guard, Salamanders and Iron Hands into a very effective fighting force, and they wage a guerrilla war against Horus's rebellion, Horus's Traitors. And then we get a full set of rules to actually allow you to play those, and this allows you to mash a load of your Legion units together. And it kind of is future-proofed as well, because you can, as well as primarily at this point being focused around the loyalists, you can equally play this traitor as well. And it has, you know, it has a whole variety of special rules and special characters. We also get, you know, if we get something that's loyalist focused in the form of the Shattered Legions of Istvaan 5, we get the Armies of Dark Compliance, which reflect if you remember from Book 5, the warp cults and the militia, well, particularly the warp cults. This allows you to create forces that are a mixture of Astartes and militia with some special rules. And if you've ever played the Battle Wars campaign, there's some rules around taking cover from your militia units with your high quality marines, which may be familiar to you here. And then we have the Knights Errant, and you can't start the Knights Errant without Nathaniel Garrow, the first of the Knights Errant. So yes, here he is finally. You know, there was a model available, and here he is. The rules are for playing him, and you know, we can't talk about Nathaniel Garrow without mentioning, indeed, the Emperor Protects. So, but yeah, very cool character, and allows you to bring a new flavour to the games. And there's so much lore and audio drama being done around Garrow. You know, it's a great idea for creating games. Then you get Tylos Rubio, the ex-Ultramarine Codicia. And then you get a general, a bog standard, shall we say, although that's not the right word to use, but you get a standard profile for a Knight Errant. So you can use the named characters, but then you can have a unnamed Knight Errant in your force. And then that brings us on to the Black Shields, the next major army section. So we get some discussion around what the Black Shields actually are. You know, and I think you could safely say there's three main origins of these. You can have loyal traitors, traitorous loyalists, and abominations. And the abominations are unsavoury creations of the Horus Heresy, which we will see. But there were things that were created using nominally Astartes techniques, but were rushed and experimented upon, and there were monstrous results. And we get the rules for depicting such creatures here. Just like with the Shattered Legions, we get a proper set of rules to accompany the Black Shield, so you can play them in 30k. And much like the militia list, what really gives the Black Shields their flavour are these wrought by war options, and these are a bit like the provenances of War for Militia. And you can have Death Seekers, the Orphans of War, Outlanders, so these are kind of like Marine Reavers who have borrowed a load of alien tech weapons, and then finally the Chimerae. And the Chimerae are the accelerated created Astartes, and you can do things like, and you can give them bonuses if you take Chimerae. However, there's always a downside to the bonus, and no one will fight with them. They're not trusted because they're unstable for various reasons. But yeah, really cool. And if you want to create the weird and wonderful in the Marine Legion, the Black Shields, it's never been so good as with the Black Shields. And then we have a picture of a Chimerae. Then we get some specific equipment. So we get the prior equipment, and then the nicely named Xenos Deathlock. So you can have Astartes with alien ray guns. We've got some great names. So for example, the Extinction, you could have a Krav Extinction Carbine, or a Psycho Mobius Claw Gun of the Carla Sistrum. Sounds good. Then we get Black Shield, and they get their own leader choice, so a Reaver Lord, so that's a kind of Praetor equivalent. And then we get the profile for the Nemean Reaver. And you can also, as well as playing him as Black Shield, you can also then use him as an agent of the Imperium, so a Knight Errant later on. We get Black Shield Marauder squads, which are kind of, so they're unique, they're kind of veteran equivalent, fast hitting like, well, the Black Shield Marauders they're sort of the Black Shield's veterans, but they've got a very eclectic mix to them, and you can put all sorts of weird and wonderful weapon combinations together. An Assault Legionary of the Black Shields, and that concludes that list. So yeah, Black Shield's very cool. And then we get a section with additions to the Space Marine Crusade Legion list. So then we get new console options. So we get the Praevian, the Delegatus, and the Herald. So these are all covering limited edition models. Awesome Iron Hands Leviathan Dreadnought from Clan Morrigal. So we get the Leviathan Pattern Siege Dreadnought. Contempt Quartus Dreadnought. So Contempt Quartus are like bargain basement Contemptors. So if you could have the Chimerae being accelerated Astartes, you could say the Contempt Quartus is a budget, cheap build Contemptor Dreadnought. New rules on the quad launcher battery, introducing the frankly horrific Phosphex canister shot. So yeah, if you really have an opponent you don't like, tool your force up to use Phosphex canister shot in your quad launchers. Vindicator Destroyers, the signature unit of the book. So in Tempest we had the Warlord Titan. Well, here we get the Mastodon Super Heavy Transport, fittingly shown as an Iron Hands here, because Iron Hands and their vehicles, love them. That's an awesome vehicle, absolutely amazing. One of these days I might buy one. That'd be a good review, that. And then we get a whole section on named characters. So we start off with Endride Ha of the ex-World Eater. I love the artwork on this guy. And he kind of looks like he's got these light spots in his hair, and I just wonder if he's had his butcher's nails removed and it's left these light spots in his hair. Interesting. Ortilian Score of the Alpha Legion, Garland Surlak, the World Eater Insane Medic, Tybalt Mar, Shadrach Meduson, let's hope we get a model for him at some point, Cassin Dracos Reborn, possibly the toughest dreadnought ever. We've got a Contemptor here with front armour of 14. He was enhanced by the Archmagos of Mezoa, so he's got a superior profile to a normal Contemptor. Narek Draeger, the Iron Warrior Traitor turned Loyalist Praevian. If you want to get some tough robots in your force, use him. Kaironophion, Xiphas Jur. But yeah, these are all really cool characters, and there's a lot of, it really allows you to sort of bring some fun into your game with including them, because they're all very memorable in their own way. Right then, this section, New Legions Astarte Special Rules, allows us to get the 3 new legions into the Imperial fold. So, well, 3 new legions into the game. Obviously you can play them Traitor, but we have the Blood Angels, the White Scars, and then the Dark Angels. So 3 eagerly anticipated legions. These are just like a first cut of the rules, and it allows you to construct a nominally functional army, but there's no specific legion units in here. It's just options and rights of war and the like. So this is a bit of like a placeholder on these legions. A welcome addition nonetheless. The Dark Angels get a wide variety of weird and wonderful war gear. The Blood Angels seem to be able to put assault cannons on anything, which is probably a rule that needs fixing. We then, the Mechanicum, get some additions. So, if you remember when I talked about Zana, well, we get this chap here, Anakaris Skoria, the bane of Space Marine Legion players everywhere. I mean, yeah, if you ever wanted a Mechanicum character to kill a Primarch in close combat, this is your chap. We'll get the Isle Attacks, Battle Automata, revised rules on the Macrocarad Explorator. So what was previously called the Mechanicum Land Raider, now got a distinct name. And then another signature unit of this book, as well as how the Legion Mastodon, we get the Ordinatus Minoris macro engine, incredible firepower, and the in particular, I mean, you can put a Bellicosa volcano cannon on it, but if you really want to upset your opponents, stick the Sonic Destructor on. And then we get the rules for the Mechanicum Cerastus Knight Atropos as well. And then finally an updated and revised section on Cybertheurgy. And then to top the whole thing off, we get the missions restated for the core missions for Age of Darkness battles as well. And that rounds the book out nicely. And we finish with a Night Lord's Leviathan Dreadnought, which has a grim story to it. I won't tell you here, but yes, interesting. The usual afterward, you know, saying what's come, what's to come, and thanking the fans. And that brings us to the end of Book 6 Retribution, and indeed, and briefly, the end of the Black Book series for now. And it's topped off by a battle scene with a pair of awesome Leviathan Dreadnoughts. So, what do I think about Book 6 Retribution? Well, I think you'll probably gather as I've gone through this review that I'm very enthusiastic about this book, and I think it is well worth getting this one. The history is really well written. You've got a very diverse set of campaign rules to support that history, and then the addition of the Shattered Legion and the Black Shield rules opens up an enormous number of possibilities for gaming the Horus Heresy, and particularly if you combine this book with Book 5 for the militia lists, what the two books do between them, predominantly Book 6, but between them, is it actually gives you the units and the missions for fighting what actually most of the Horus Heresy was about. So yes, Books 1 and 2 deal with the historic battles of Istvaan. However, they were one-offs. What most of the Heresy was about, it was about the Shattered Legions, and it was about the Black Shields, and it was about the militias, and all that sort of small-scale action. But at the same time, you can still field large, structured Legion forces, you know, and that's personified in this by Ortek Moore's Red Talons of Clan Morrigal, which, although part of a very battered legion, are still a large, sizable, structured Iron Hand force in the pre-Heresy style. So yeah, absolutely cracking book. I would highly recommend this one. And I think in terms of the rules are all up to date in terms of the currently available army books. But I think even beyond that, and if those rules do move on, the history and the campaign rules around this is going to leave it as a strong recommendation for buying. So anyway, let me know what you think about the Horus Heresy Book 6 Retribution. If you've got anything to say, I'd be interested to hear. But yeah, thank you very much as always for watching. I will speak to you next time, and goodbye.